RFK Jr.'s new vaccine advisors will vote on flu shots containing mercury. Now, this is interesting. For anybody who doesn't know, RFK Jr. recently canned the entire CDC vaccine advisory panel and replaced them with new members, completely new members. 17 members got canned, and I believe he added in 8, at least last I had heard. His reasoning for doing so was that the originals were biased and corrupted by corporate influence, and these new ones have more skepticism and will be more fair, I guess. But it seems that the people that he's brought in are not just vaccine skeptics. At the very least, one of them was very heavily spreading misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine during COVID-19, and is just way more than a vaccine skeptic, to the point of a disinformation campaignist. And now apparently they're going to be voting on flu shots containing mercury. My understanding was flu shots don't contain mercury anymore. Let's see here. Thimerosal. It's an ethyl mercury-based preservatives. Safeguard against contamination of the vial. Most single pre-syringe flu shot and the nasal spray flu vaccine do not contain a preservative because they are intended to be used only once. Preservatives are used to protect vaccines packaged in multi-dose vials each time a vaccine. So thimerosal use in vaccines and other medical products has a record of being very safe. Data from many studies show no evidence of harm caused by the low doses of thimerosal in vaccines. Okay. I might be thinking of something a little bit different. I might have been thinking of the history of thimerosal, that they, during the time when there was questions that it might be causing problems in the vaccine, that the FDA decided, like, we're just going to stop as a precautionary element, putting thimerosal in vaccines. But after doing research, I guess they found that it is safe to use mercury. There are no problems with it. Let's see, prevention, season of vaccines, recommended advisory committee. Yeah, I want to find some of this research they're talking about, because if the new panel is going to vote on it, well, they should be pretty well informed about the science behind the matter, shouldn't they? Not going to be very safe. Well, I wish that they would cite their information here. It is the CDC's website, after all. Is this another? Okay, thimerosal removal. Okay, thimerosal was taken out of childhood vaccines in 2001. Angels, Monster, Varicella, for a complete list of vaccines and the thimerosal content levels. So they're out of child vaccines. I guess they left them in adult vaccines. Need to see what they found here. Mercury is a naturally occurring element found in Earth's crust, etc., etc. Methylmercury is a type of mercury found in certain kinds of fish. In the United States, federal guidelines keep as much methylmercury as possible out of the environment and food, but over a lifetime, everyone is exposed to some methylmercury. Thimerosal contains ethylmercury, which is cleared from the human body more quickly than methylmercury and is therefore less likely to cause any harm. We know the purpose. It's a preservative. It was removed from children's vaccines. What the research shows? Fact. Thimerosal use in medical products has a record of being very safe. Data from many studies show no evidence of harm caused by the low dose in vaccines. And now they actually have some sources. Okay, Pediatrics 2010, 2007, 2009, 2003. Yeah, so not only is this well cited, this is old research as well, meaning like we've known this for a while. And it's not something that's going to suddenly change. And if it does, we'll see it in data. We have to see it in data, right? We're not going to make new decisions on policy from a gut feeling. At least not sweeping ones, maybe a precautionary change. Let's see. There were no findings of increased risk for any of the 3 ASD outcomes. The adjusted odd ratios, 95% confidence intervals for ASD associated with a 2SD increase in ethyl mercury exposure were 1.2 for prenatal exposure and 0.88 for exposure from birth to 1 month, 0.66 for exposure from birth to 7 months, and 0.6 from exposure from birth to 20 months. In our study of MCO members' prenatal and early life exposure to ethyl mercury from thimerosal-containing vaccines and immunoglobulin preparations was not related to increased risk of ASDs. What are ASDs? Oh, this is specifically for autism. Okay. Yeah, and the interesting thing here is it's also, this isn't for adults, this is just for children. So even though they've removed this preservative from, children's vaccines, they show that there is no increased risk of autism. I need to read the others to see what other risks might be included. My understanding is the primary concern is autism, but there could be other concerns, and I want to give those due diligence. Not just the autism, but I know autism was the primary concern. At least that's what most people say. It looks like there is a drawdown, like the results are safer the older the child is. Let's see. Autism, the adjusted odd ratios. Okay, so these are odd ratios. Yeah, the odds go down as the child gets older. So not only are they statistically insignificant when they are children, they go down substantially as they get older, which to me is a great reason for them to say, you know what, let's take it out of children's vaccines, but keep it in adults. It probably doesn't matter. It probably wouldn't even matter for the children's vaccines, but as a precautionary measure, we have other preservatives that we can use that would, cause less of an uproar here. So let's stick with that. Let's see what else they got here. Early thimerosal exposure and neurophysical outcomes at 7 to 10 years. So this is even a little bit older. Among the 42 neuropsychological outcomes, we detected only a few significant associations with exposure to mercury from thimerosal. Few significant associations. What does that mean? The detected associations were small and almost equally divided between positive and negative effects. Higher prenatal mercury exposure was associated with better performance on one measure of language and poor performance on one measure of attention and executive functioning. Increasing levels of mercury exposure from birth to 7 months were associated with better performance on one measure of fine motor coordination and on one measure of attention and executive functioning. Increasing mercury exposure from birth to 28 days was associated with poor performance on one measure. Okay, so the conclusion is our study does not support a causal association between early exposure to mercury from thimerosal-containing vaccines and immune globulins and deficits in neuropsychological functioning at the age of 7 to 10 years. Was this, okay, 1,000 children assessing 42 neuropsychological outcomes. Okay, that's what I wanted to check. I wanted to check if they meant they only had 42 children or they had 42 different neuropsychological outcomes. Only a few significant ones. Small and almost equally divided among positive and negative effects. So at the very least, I don't even know that I want to say that. It just seems like, yeah, there's no causal association, it seems. Okay. 10 years after immunization. Self-maintenance. I think these are all basically autism. That last one did say 42 different neuropsychological conditions. I didn't go through each one, but mostly for mercury. Okay, well, let's go back to the main article here and see what they are voting on. Okay. So new vaccine advisors voting on flu shots containing mercury. So these are flu shots. These aren't necessarily like childhood vaccines or even really adult vaccines. Would that still technically be a vaccine? I mean, like, yes, it's a vaccine in that you get a shot and that it immunizes you against the flu. But in this case, are they categorized the same way by the FDA? I believe that would mean that, yes, they are the same, meaning that there would be like mercury in flu shots, and flu shots are typically only given to adults. I don't think, are they given to children? I don't have any kids, if you couldn't tell. And I certainly didn't when I was a kid. Think we can afford that stuff? No. Recommended and widely given to children. Okay. How about Marisol? In children's flu vaccines. I assume they've been removed, right? Some formulations of an inactivated influenza vaccine for children may still contain thimerosal as a preservative. However, thimerosal is not currently used in vaccines routinely recommended for children aged 6 years and younger in the U.S., with the exception of certain influenza vaccine formulations. Availability. For those who prefer a thimerosal-free flu vaccine for their children, single-dose flu shots are available for anyone age 6 months and older, and nasal spray vaccine is available for those aged 2 through 49. As a precautionary measure, some states have implemented laws that limit or prohibit the use of thimerosal in vaccines for young children and pregnant women, although exceptions may be made during these times of vaccine shortages. Okay, so there are still some that have thimerosal in them, but again, remember, they did not find any statistically significant correlations between the neuropsychological conditions that you might develop and the mercury, the thimerosal, in the flu vaccine. And even if they did, there are non-mercury based alternatives available. So what is the point of them voting on this? A government vaccine advisory panel recently reconstituted by the head of Health and Human Services is scheduled to vote on thimerosal containing vaccines during their meeting on June 26th. This follows Kennedy's dismissal of all 17 previous committee members and appointment of 8 new advisors, many known as vaccine critics, to put it gently. Thimerosal has long served as a preservative in multi-dose vaccines to inhibit bacterial combination, though its application has decreased as vaccine manufacturers have increasingly adopted single-dose formats. Now, that's another interesting thing to remember. I don't know that I've ever seen a flu vaccine that is multi-dose. Anyone that I've ever gotten has always been single-dose, so I can't imagine any of those would have had thimerosal in them. There's no need to have a preservative in a single-dose vaccine. As long as you administer it within the shelf life, it is preserved. According to the FDA, research conducted over more than 2 decades has found no indications that thimerosal in vaccines causes harm, including any serious neurodevelopmental conditions. The committee will also review data on other vaccines, including COVID and RSV shots, influencing U.S. immunization policy amid ongoing debates about vaccine safety. You say anything else here? That seems uninformative, just that they're going to be voting on flu shots containing mercury. Voting what? Right now, we don't have a lot of them, and if we do, there are non-mercury containing options available, and it sounds like they're going to keep moving away from that, because at the very least, I think the general public just kind of doesn't like the idea, right? That like, oh, there might be mercury in there, it might be not so great for my kids, I want to do what's best for my kids. I think any parent who is on top of that and cares will ask their doctor for, a mercury-free version. So I think that, yeah, most companies realize that most people just, they don't feel good about it, and so they'll move away from it. And that has been the decision of the FDA for quite a while, it sounds like. So, new panel, vote on flu shots, advisors to consider MMRV vaccines, thimerosal containing flu shots, and pared down meeting. Are there any? It would just be multi-dose ones, right? What flu vaccines? Thimerosal. Refilled syringes. Most of the flu vaccine supply produced for recent seasons, like 23, 24, 24, 25, is thimerosal free or thimerosal reduced. Interesting. So they have a reduced option as well, which we already saw insignificant correlations between neuropsychological development and thimerosal intake in young kids and prenatals. Routinely recommended vaccines for children 6 years of age and younger in the U.S. are available in formulations. Okay. Specific multi-dose flu vaccines may contain that may contain thimerosal include Alpharia, Flucelavax, Fluzone. The point of multi-dose flu vaccine Is this just something for children that I've never seen before? Contain multiple doses in a single vial, serve several key purposes. Reduce costs, less cold storage, facilitates. Wait. Less cold storage? Are you saying that they sterilize it and reuse the needle, or reduce cost? One multi-dose vial occupies less space than multiple individual pre-filled syringes. Easing storage challenges. Lower production time. I assume they're not using the same needle. I assume it's just like a vial that can be input to a new clean needle. Need for preservatives, potential contamination, staffing complexity. Yeah. Why would you use multi-dose over single dose? Oh, here's something by the NIH. What do you know? Single dose versus multi-dose vaccine vials for immunization programs in developing countries. So not quite what I'm looking for, but this could be beneficial. When was this? 2003, so it's been a little while. And this was all about vaccine wastage and safety. This has nothing to do with efficacy of the medication. Multi versus single dose vaccine efficacy. What did the NIH say? Now this is the same thing. Vaccine wastage. I'm not immediately seeing any reason why you would want to use multi over single. It could just be as simple as manufacturing and cost and storage and like all the logistics behind creating a vaccine. It may not have anything to do with why, you know, like why it might be more effective or less effective. And what that would mean to me is that most likely there's going to be multiple options available, which is what we've seen, both single and multi-dose available. And the type of vaccine that you get is probably going to be related to choice of, you know, manufacturer, who you're willing to pay for with your doctor, just because both formulations are available and don't really have a substantial difference between the two of them. The real main difference is that since one is multi-dose, it requires a preservative to maintain its shelf life for longer, which in this case is usually thimerosal, at least for most adult vaccines and for some kids vaccines. But they have other options available because there has been pushback on that, even though they don't have any correlation between neuropsychological disorders and thimerosal in vaccines. Okay. I'm mostly just curious about the language that they're using in these articles because thimerosal has long served as a preservative in multi-dose vaccines to inhibit bacterial contamination, though its application has decreased as vaccine manufacturers have increasingly adopted single-dose formats. I was mostly curious just because they kind of bounce around the different formulations and the different types, but it brings me back to what's the point of them voting on this? Why do they need to make a change to the way the current documentation is done? Like the current protocol seems pretty sufficient to me, seems fine. Like you're not forced to get thimerosal. You're not going to be swindled into it. There's plenty of options available outside of that. And even if you were forced to, even if there was some kind of a shortage, there is no statistically correlated evidence, which I suppose this all could go back to you just don't trust institutions and you don't believe in any of these articles that I'm reading and say burn it all down. If that's the case, I don't think we can work together. I don't know what to do to have this discussion with you. You are the kind of person, I guess, that wants to, you know, be completely libertarian and live out on their own ranch somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And that's fine. You can want that and be distrustful of everybody. But two things. One, I don't think that lifestyle is maintainable anymore. Our population is increasing at too much of a rate for that to be possible. The only way that becomes possible is if you decide and everybody else decides we're not having any more kids. We're not going to bring anybody else into this world. We don't have the room for it. We don't have the space. I want my own private ranch in the middle of nowhere and for nobody to bother me and for that to work. So it can't work because everybody wants kids. And secondly, in order for us to function and move forward as a society, we have to have institutions. We have to have these organizations that do this research and do this understanding of science and set this policy. Because if they didn't, then we would have the Wild West of before the FDA was created and before these organizations were created, where anybody could just come into any market with any sort of a snake coil and pretend to sell you, the cure for cancer, when in reality, it's a stimulant. They're giving you, some cocaine or whatever. And yeah, it makes you feel better. It makes you think that you're getting better. But in reality, it's a lie. Your body just thinks it's feeling better. It doesn't actually get rid of any of the cancer. As a matter of fact, it probably accelerates the growth of the cancer because it is a stimulant. But by the time you figure out that they lied to you and swindled you, they're gone and they have taken your money. That's a world that I don't want to go back to. And the only way that we are able to move forward is to not blindly trust the institutions, mind you. I'm not saying that. We do definitely hold them accountable and make sure that there's a lot of academic rigor behind their research. But I would say at the very basics of it, we have to have these institutions. They have to exist in some form.